Hi, good day. My name is Cadet Alesna and we are the Group 1. So today we are going to tackle about the introduction to the study of globalization. Next is the learning objectives. So the learning objectives is to secure socioeconomic integrated and development of all the people of the world through a free flow of goods, service, information, knowledge across all the boundaries. Next is what really is globalization. So before that, we're going to watch a short video about the globalization.
We explain the process of globalization. Globalization is the term used to describe the way countries are becoming more interconnected, both economically and culturally. Globalization is an international process driven by trade, investment, technology and finance. This process has effects on the environment, on culture, on political systems, on economic development and prosperity, and on human physical well-being in societies around the world. Globalization is not new, though. For thousands of years, people, and, later, corporations, have been buying from and selling to each other in lands at great distances. One such example is the famed Silk Road across Central Asia that connected China and Europe during the Middle Ages. But what exactly drives globalization? Over the past 20 years there have been significant developments in both communications and transport technologies. The introduction of specialized bulk carriers and container ships has helped to reduce the cost of transport and greatly increase the volume of world trade. Recent developments in communications technology, especially the development of the internet and email, enable people anywhere on Earth to have access to and distribute vast amounts of information. The production and distribution of goods and services is increasingly dominated by very large companies known as transnational corporations, TNCs. The business links of TNCs create a more integrated world economy where decisions made in one country can affect people in other parts of the world. International trade has given countries access to goods and services they are unable to produce themselves or can obtain more cheaply from other places. Watch the next video to find out the impacts of globalization. Thank you for watching Adumacate.
Has become one of the defining buzzwords of our time. It is a term that describes a variety of accelerating economic, political, cultural, ideological, and environmental processes that are rapidly altering our experience of the world. So in the economic dimension of globalization, it explores how the way people have undertaken economic production has changed. So in the global economic order emerged after the World War II, when the Bretton Woods Conference laid the foundation for the World Bank. In the 1980s, neoliberalism liberalized financial transaction. However, this unstable growth led to great financial crash where banks traded toxic assets without regulation. Transnation corporation rival nation states in economic power and have had a profound effect on the structure and function of the global economy. So in the Washington Consensus was drafted to reform indebted developing countries, but it was far rarely helped countries develop. Next is the political dimension of globalization. At political arrangements beyond the nation state, traditional politics harbored an us and them mentality. Contemporary globalization has led to a formation of those borders. The modern nation state came into being after the Protestant Reformation, characterized by centralized government and self-determination. The rise of organizations such as the United Nations has threatened the nation state according to the globalization skeptics. However, national governments still hold significant powers. There has been a rise in the number of supra-territorial institutions operating from the local level all the way up to the global level. Some commentators ultimately see a global civil society, although critics questions the feasibility of this. So next is the cultural dimension of globalization. So in the cultural dimension of globalization, it explores the intensification and expansion of cultural flows across the globe. So, which is true. That it flows across the globe. Critics of cultural globalization claim that the world is being homogenized or Americanized. However, advocates say that globalization reinvigorates niche cultures instead of eliminating them. The existence of the global imaginary is linked to the rise of global media networks. These networks are owned by a small group of transnational corporations which can affect journalistic integrity. Several different hypotheses exist about the effects of language globalization. Some say that it leads to protection of the native tongue. On the other hand, some foresee the rise of globish language. Next is the ecological dimension of globalization. It examines the effects of global alliances on ecological issues. There is an inexorable link between all the humanity and the planet Earth. The Industrial Revolution has caused many ecological problems, including resources and food shortages, overpopulation, reduced biodiversity, pollution, and climate change. All these problems are global, the result of aggregated human actions, and require a coordinated response. However, there are still debates about the seriousness of ecological issue. Whilst the progress has been made, few multilateral measures have been implemented. This phase of globalization has been severely damaging to the environment and action is needed now. So globalization is much stronger now because of the technology that we've been using to communicate, to share, and spread the ideas that we have. So there's so much more in the globalization that will be more tackled by my group mates. Globalization is commonly thought of as a new phenomenon, but contact between the diverse individual is not new. It began when prehistoric tribes settled and were able to outmuscle wandering tribes. The pre-modern period saw technological advances that allow trade and communication to flourish. The early modern period saw the birth of capitalism and regional markets. The modern period saw the Industrial Revolution provide massive advances in technology at the expense of the environment. So, and then the contemporary era is an era of convergence, with people coming together through deregulated economic and ICT systems.
Theory of liberalism. Liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on the rights of the individual, liberty, consent of governed, and equality before the law. Liberalism is a school of thought within international relations theory, which can be thought to revolve around three interrelated principles: rejection of power politics as the only possible outcome of international relations. It questions security warfare principles of realism. It is based on the moral argument that ensuring the right of an individual person to life, liberty, and property is the highest goal of government. Consequently, liberals emphasize the well-being of individual as the fundamental building block of just political system. With the proper institution of diplomacy, liberals believe that the states can work together to maximize prosperity and minimize conflict. Supporters of liberalism often believe in the spreading of democracy through cooperation. Examples are the fundamental liberal ideals of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the separation of church and state, the right to due process, and equality under the law are widely accepted as a common foundation of liberalism. So next we have theory of political realism. Realism is an approach to the study and practice of international politics. It emphasizes the roles of the nation-state and makes a broad assumption that all nation-states are motivated by national interest, or national interest disguised as moral concerns. Realists tend to believe that whatever we believe now is only an approximation of reality, but the accuracy and fullness of understanding can be improved. In some contexts, realism is contrasted with idealism. Realists believe that their theory most closely describe the image of world politics held by practitioners of statecraft. Realists also believe that our selfishness, our appetite for power, and our inability to trust others lead to predictable outcomes. Perhaps this is why war has been so common throughout recorded history. So next we have theory of Marxism. Marxism is the theory of Karl Marx, which says that society's classes are the cause of struggle and that society should have no classes. The main modes of production that Marx identified generally include primitive communism, slave society, feudalism, mercantilism, and capitalism. In each of these social stages, people interacted with nature and production in different ways. An example of Marxism is replacing private ownership with cooperative ownership. According to Investopedia, Marx wrote that the power relationship between capitalists and workers are inherently exploitative and would inevitably create class conflict. He believed that this conflict would ultimately lead to a revolution in which the working class would overthrow the capitalist class and seize control of economy. That's all.
The next topic that we are about to discuss is the theory of constructivism. Constructivism is a theory on education which process that individual learners do not acquire knowledge and understanding by passively perceiving, with a direct process of knowledge transition. Learners communicate with each other and share understanding and experience to come up with a new knowledge. The origin of the constructivism
can be traced back at education psychology in the work of Jim Piaget in the year of 1896 to 1980. Identified with the Piaget theory of cognitive development, Piaget called this system of knowledge called scheme. Also, Jean Piaget's focus on how humans make meanings in relation to their meaning and knowledge construction. The next one is method. The method of constructivism is composed at least 5 stages: inviting ideas, exploration, proposition, explanation, solution, and taking action. Good example of constructivism is in our classroom also focus on daily activities when it comes to student work. It is based also in the belief that learning occurs as learners and actively involved in the process of meaning and knowledge on construction. So, constructivism is based on the idea that people actively construct or make their own knowledge, and that reality is determined by your experience as a learner. Basically, learners are used to their previous knowledge as a foundation and build on the new things that they learn. Furthermore, constructivism is an important learning theory that educators use to help us students to learn and build up more knowledge that we can comprehend in the further in the near future of the knowledge. The next theory that I discussed is the postmodernism. Postmodernism is an intellectual stance or mode of discourse defined by an attitude of skepticism toward what is considers as the grand narratives and ideologies of modernism, as well as opposition to epistemic certainty and stability of meaning, claims to objective facts are dismissed as naive realism. Postmodernism describes knowledge that claims value systems, political, historical, and hierarchies. Postmodernism relies on critical theory. Ethics. Ethics of postmodernism is our approach from the viewpoint of postmodern ethics, which reject the foundation of morality and hierarchy of values on which professional codes of ethics are based. Postmodernism ethics instead aims to emancipation of autonomous moral self and vindication of moral responsibility. So, postmodernism view there are no absolute of any kind, and there are no universal truth or no universal criteria for beauty, and nor the universal principle of good. The next one is the era of postmodernism. In the late 20th century, movement in philosophy and literary theory that generally questioned the basic assumption of Western philosophy in the modern period, roughly in 17th century through the 19th century. Postmodernism is largely a reaction against the intellectual assumption and values and modern period in the history of Western philosophy. So, postmodernism is generally defined by an attitude of skepticism, irony, or rejection towards what is described as the grand narrative and ideologies associated with modernism, especially those associated with enlightenment rationally through modernism in the art of made them have their own definition. Also, postmodernism includes universalist ideas and objective reality, morality, truth, human nature, reasons, science, language, and social progress. The next one is the theory of feminism. So, this theory focuses on analyzing gender equality. Themes often explored the feminist theory include discrimination, objectification, especially sexual objectification, oppression, patriarchy, stereotyping, art history and contemporary art and aesthetics. The advocacy of human rights based on equality of the sexes. The beliefs in social, economic, and political equality for women or women rights. The key areas of feminism, usually called, which is identified as in feminist theory, includes discrimination, exclusion on the basis of sex and gender, objectification, and structural. The lastly is economic inequality. The key areas of feminism is widely based in individual based on the equalities and against equality and equity and the core concept in this feminist theory. The importance of feminism. Feminism theory helps us to better understand and address inequality and oppressed gender relation. The minimal progress that has been made to close the wide gap is thanks in part of greater access to education for women and their representation outside the gender rules. Gender-defined rules. The common myth of feminism is about women gaining social equality with men. And feminism theory helps us better understand the equality of the rights of the women between men and also their experience in work and equality in our society. So feminism is quietly simple. It's all about gender, having equal rights and opportunities. It's about respecting diverse women experience, identities, knowledge, and strength, and striving to empower all women to realize their full rights. Feminism that seeks to liberate all women leads inexorable to solidarity politics, solidarity economics, and revolution, a global citizen movement, as described by the Great Transition Initiative. Feminist theory doesn't look at the gender power and oppression. This is to understand the woman experience are different from men experience. It is widely concerned and analyze how this structure came into being manifest in our society, and we might address this form of sexism. So that's all about it. My theory of feminism and my part of theory of constructivism and the theory of postmodernism.
Hello, I'm the Cadet Duarte Jinabin, and I will discuss the theory of transformationalism and eclecticism. So first, transformationalists and postmodernists agree that the impact of globalization has been exaggerated by globalists, but argue that it is foolish to reject the concept out of hand. This theoretical position argue that globalization should be understood as a complex set of interconnecting relationships through which power, for the most part, is exercised indirectly. They suggest that the globalization process can be reversed, especially where it is negative. Hello, I'm the Cadet Duarte Jinabin, and I will discuss the theory of transformationalism and eclecticism. So first, transformationalists and postmodernists agree that the impact of globalization has been exaggerated by globalists, but argue that it is foolish to reject the concept out of hand. This theoretical position argued that globalization should be understood as a complex set of interconnecting relationships through which power, for the most part, is exercised indirectly. They suggest that the globalization process can be reversed, especially where it is negative, or at the very least that it can be controlled. Transformationalists argued that the flow of culture is not one from the West to the developing world. It is a two-way exchange in which Western culture is also influenced, changed, and enriched by cultures in the developing world. So, transformationalists and postmodernists also see the global media as beneficial because it is primarily possible for diffusing different culture styles around the world and creating new global hybrid styles in fashion, food, music, consumption, and lifestyle. And it is argued that the global postmodern world, such cultural diversity and pluralism, will become the norm. Postmodernists thus see globalization as a positive phenomenon because it has created a new class of global consumers. It both the developed and the developing world, with a greater range of choice from which they can construct a global identity. And it's also evidence that global communication system and social network can be assist local culture to rid themselves of pervasive political system such as dictatorship. So in the transformationalism, there are the two further sociologists who might be described as transformationalists globalists are Anthony Giddens and Ulrich Beck. So Anthony Giddens argued that one consequence of globalization is traditionalization, where people question their tradition beliefs about religion, marriage, and gender roles, and so on. So Giddens uses the concept of detraditionalization rather than decline of tradition to reflect the fact that in many cases people continue with their traditional ways of life rather than actually changing them, but the very fact that they are now actively questioning aspect for their lives means culture as much less stable and less predictable than before globalization, because more people are aware of the fact that there are alternative ways of doing things and they can change tradition if they want to. And Ulrich Beck argued that a fundamental feature of globalization is the development of global risk, which emerged due to shared global problems which threaten people in multiple countries. Examples includes the threat of terrorism, international nuclear war, the threat of global pandemics, the risk of organized crime funded primarily through international drug trafficking, and the threat of planetary meltdown due to the global warming. And the second is the theory of eclecticism. So Eclecticism is a conceptual approach that does not hold regardless to a single parad- paradigm or set of assumptions, but instead draw upon multiple stories, styles, or ideas to gain complementary insight into a subject or applies different theory in particular cases. However, this is often without conventions or rules dictating how or which theories were combined. It also sometimes seems inelegant or lacking in simplicity, and electics are sometimes criticized for lack of consistency in their thinking. It is, however, common in many fields of study. For example, most sociology aspect certain aspect of behaviorism, but do not attempt to use the theory to explain all aspects of human behavior. So, eclecticism is an eclecticism in ethics, philosophy, politics, and religion is also known as centritism. We define theoretical eclecticism as intentionally drawing on different theories of learning when making instructional decisions with the goal of proving students with instructional support they need to be successful. And additionally, what is eclecticism in psychology? So eclecticism is use of many unrelated different item to form a whole. In logical counseling, eclecticism can refer to the eclectic perspective. This means choosing methods and techniques from different school of though to proceed positive result and a tailored plan for a specific individual. In the modern philosophy, Victor Cousins was the founder of the modern eclecticism. So Victor Cousin was a French philosopher. He was the founder of eclecticism, a briefly influential school of French philosophy that combined elements of German idealism and Scottish common sense realism. As a administrator of public instruction for over a decade, Cousins also had an important influence of French educational policy. That's all. Thank you.
Who benefits globalization? Globalization has benefit an emerging global middle class, mainly people and countries. Globalization impacts business in many different ways, but those who decide to take on international expansion find several benefits, including access to the new cultures, the spread of technology and innovation, lower costs for products, higher standards of living across the globe, access the new markets, access the new talent. Globalization allows companies to find lower cost way to produce their products. It also increases global competition, which drives prices down and creates a larger variety of choices for consumers. Lower costs help people in both developing and already developed countries live better or less money. The engine of globalization economic example, between 1950 and 2010, world export increased 33-fold. This significantly contribute to increase the interaction between different regions of the world. This acceleration of economic exchange has led to strongly global economic growth. Free trade agreements such the North American Free Trade Agreements and Trans-Pacific Partnership are examples of economic globalization. Multinational corporations which cooperate in two or more countries play a large role in economic globalization. One of the main benefits of financial globalization is the development of the financial sector. Financial markets become deeper and more sophisticated when they integrate with world markets, increasing the financial alternatives for borrowers and investors. This is one of the most obvious examples of cultural globalization. Food consumption is an important aspect of culture, and most societies around the world have diets and that are unique to them. However, the cultural globalization of food has been promoted by the fast food giants such as McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Starbucks. The spread of this global food corporation has arguably led to the decline of local diets and eating tradition.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm the last reporter in our group, and my topic is about the negative effects of globalization. So I have here the five most important part of globalization as what you have seen on your screen right now. So the culture, society, politics, economy, and environment. So let's talk about culture first. Globalization of culture can lead to a disassociation of one's own culture. Another example, another simple word for this is to detach from own association. For example, Middle Eastern countries like Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. If you try to search those countries, you can see that they are the perfect examples because they are the ones who suffer. Who suffer from this association, as customs and traditions have been changed. Even aspects of their culture, like fashion and attire, has not been changed as well. Uh, yep. Just to add up, other consequences of negative culture really includes gossiping. Yep, a low employee engagement, higher rates of absenteeism and presenteeism, lack of empathy, a lack of flexibility, and high employee turnover. So that's all for the culture. Now let's proceed to society. Talking about this topic, there is a lot to say about society, really. So it has had a few adverse effects on developed countries. Some adverse consequences of globalization includes terrorism, job insecurity, currency fluctuation, and price instability. Let me explain about tourism first. Tourism is a significant problem in most developed countries. We all know that. Due to worldwide integration, people travel a lot. Yep, some of them move abroad for studying or doing some business or visiting relatives, work and access hospital services. However, not all of them are totally honest. Lots of tourists came to a foreign country with a worker visa, having a hidden goal to perform a terrorist attack. It's a problem that has posed for fear among citizens who can't trust their neighbors. So unfortunately, terrorists recruit young people. We can see that also on the TV or in the movie. They will recruit younger ages, so that the people or the country can trust them easily. So residents of the country and make them um, believe that they are doing the right thing. That's what I've mentioned. So that's why there are fear, mistrust, and tension in society. Like for example, in America, uh, excuse me, there is a lot of racist in there. If they can see Arabs people or Muslims, they will totally get away or get far from those people because they can only think of one thing, which is they are a terrorist, those people. But now let's talk. I mean, yeah, that's the great example about Arabs people. Here in the Philippines, we don't have a lot of racist people because we are much understandable and hospitable compared to the American people. Yep. So that's all for terrorism. So now let's talk about job security. Before globalization, skilled people got employment in government sectors and companies where they received high salaries. Yep, job opportunities were waiting for those who completed college and earned a degree. If you don't have a degree, you can't really get a nice job or a nice paid salary. People would resign a job and quickly get another because they are a degree holder. Due to globalization, there are many people seeking employment all over the world. Employees take advantage of cheap labor because they can benefit as well. One can get a dismissal because of a slight mistake, as the employer can find a skilled worker who is really to be paid less. I'll cite an example. Me myself, I don't have a degree yet, and I'm currently working right now as a customer service representative. I don't get paid a lot, but due to financial problem, and I am really in need right now, so that's fine as long as I have money to feed on my family, especially on myself. Then it's all good. That's how it's simple it is, right? So let's proceed to currency fluctuation. International trade buys and sells products using the U.S. dollar. The price of dollar fluctuates day to day in developing countries. This results in balanced economy and normal prices for goods and services. Because a currency's exchange rate is typically determined by the strength or weakness of the underlying economy. As such, a currency's value can fluctuate from one time to the next. Like here in the Philippines, we all know that the Philippines offers a mutual salary. Like you can you can't really get a savings because the salary that you have is not enough for you to is not enough for your wants and needs. And all prices has been changed already. Even the gas, before it was just 11 pesos, 17 pesos. Now it's almost 100. But then your salary is still stuck on the same amount. It'll only get increased if you have a nice and a good performance. So that's how it works. Um, Last part of society topic is about price and stability. This one is really simple and understandable. Price instability is a significant effect of globalization and business. Some people establish industries overseas where they get cheap raw materials and labor. They can cut production costs and sell their goods at a low price due to competition, and every country experiences this one, I'm pretty sure. High quality products differ in prices. No matter how the World Trade Organization has tried to control price fluctuation, their efforts are not successful. So these companies reach out to consumers using modern technology. Successful business are for those who can find a competitive advantage and especially make high quality products for a low price. They did these things because they are a lot. There are a lot of businessmen all over the world. So to make the business successful, they will cut off the price to a lesser one, so that the consumers will stick to the lesser one. Um, Now let's talk about politics. From the word itself, politics, it's quite messy. It's quite messy to imagine. When I hear politics, all I can visualize is like um, there is no positive on this part. Well, I'm sorry to say, but it's my opinion though. To be frank, I really hate politics. Um, Promising this, promising that, stealing here, stealing there. They just act that they care, but to tell you honestly, they are not. They are just doing it for the benefits that they can get. In politics scope, globalization has had many negative consequences, such as increased power and liberty of nations, government. Yeah. So groups and non-governmental parties, expand of new political culture, weaken and wash of the role and hegemony of states and illegitimate control of nations. That's all for politics. So the fourth part of my topic is the economy. Studies also suggest that the globalization may contribute to income disparity and equality between the more educated and less educated member of a society. Um, I think I've already mentioned that on my previous topic, so we know this already, but just to add up, it means that unskilled workers may be affected by declining wages, which are under constant pressure from globalizations. So if the economy will go down, so do we. So some argue that globalization is a positive development as it will give rise to new industries and more jobs in developing countries. Others say globalization is negative in that it will force poorer countries to do, the poorer countries of the world to do whatever the big developed countries tell them to do so. So controlling someone or something is not a good thing to do. And a friendly reminder, never ever look down on anybody else unless you are helping them up. So now let's go to the last bottom part of my report. Excuse me. Which is the environment. So in this part right here, there's a lot to say. There's a lot to say, to share, as well. Same goes with my topic earlier, which is the society. Let me tell you something. We won't have a society if we destroy the environment. So it's all connected. So negative effects of this topic are, first, increased greenhouse gas emissions. You know, greenhouse gases have far-ranging environmental and health effects. Correct. They cause climate change by trapping heat. Yep, indeed. And they also contribute to respiratory disease from smog and air pollution, extreme weather, food supply disruptions, and increased wildfires are other effects of climate change caused by greenhouse gases. Is exactly absolutely fact. Now, another negative effect example is ocean acidification. Ocean acidification reduces the amount of carbonate, a key building block in seawater. Well, yeah, for this one, this makes it more difficult for marine organisms, such as corals and some plankton, to form their shells and skeletons, and existing shells may begin to dissolve because from the word acid, we all know what it does. So, last example would be deforestation. The loss of trees and other vegetation can cause climate change. Desertification, soil erosion, fewer crops, flooding, increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and a host of problems for indigenous people. Those are some example of the negative effects of our environment. And that's all for my report. I'll just leave you with a message. Nature is our treasure. Help save it. A beautiful environment starts with you. Thanks for listening. Hope you all learned something. This is Mir from Group 1. Peace out.